The last thing I remembered was the feeling of my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Leo's face was flushed, his eyes, the color of summer storms, were fixed on me, wide with a hope so fragile it felt like a physical thing between us. The cacophony of the school hallway seemed to fade into a dull roar. The sweltering heat, the buzz of the cicadas, the scent of old wood and chalk dust, it all coalesced into a single breathless moment. I nodded. A simple tiny motion. And his entire being lit up as if someone had switched on the sun. "No takebacks, okay?" he'd said, his voice tight with nerves shining like a brand new coin. "Tomorrow morning I'll come pick you up." Then the world dissolved. I didn't wake up slowly. I was just elsewhere. The stiff wooden bed of my dorm was gone, replaced by a mattress so soft it felt like I was sinking. The air smelled of lemon polish and something faintly floral, a far cry from the stale adolescent scent of my shared room. My hand, which had been empty, now clutched a piece of paper, crumpled and worn at the edges, as if it had been folded and refolded 100 times. I blinked, my vision swimming into focus. I was in a bedroom that belonged in a magazine. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, casting tiny rainbows on the walls. A thick, intricate carpet lay beneath my bare feet. Disorientation washed over me, a cold, nauseating wave. Before I could even process it, the heavy wooden door swung open and a little boy, no more than 4 or 5, marched in. He had a frown etched on his face that looked comically severe on someone so small. "Mom," he said, his tone one of pure exasperation. I froze. The word echoed in my hollowed-out mind. I stared at him and a jolt of surreal recognition shot through me. His face. It was a perfect miniature version of my own. The same shape of the eyes, the same stubborn set of the jaw. My eyes darted to a sleek digital calendar on the bedside table. 2025. The number hit me like a physical blow. 7 years. I had fallen asleep in my dorm room and woken up 7 years in the future. Images of 19-year-old Leo, his ears still red from his confession, flashed behind my eyes. But the man who belonged in this opulent room, the man who was presumably this child's father, was he still that boy? I looked around. There were no wedding photos, no signs of a man's presence. Just cold, expensive perfection. I sat down gently on the edge of the bed, my legs feeling like water. "What's your name?" I asked, my voice a low, unfamiliar rasp. He rolled his eyes, a gesture he'd clearly perfected. "I'm Ben. Ben Miller." "Mom, what are you planning this time?" "Miller." So I had married Leo Miller. The relief of that confirmation was immediately soured by his tone. "What are you planning this time?" What kind of mother was I that my own son spoke to me with such weary annoyance? While I was still reeling, Ben strode over, snatched the crumpled paper from my limp hand, and placed it on the bedside table with a practiced air. "Mom, not again," he muttered, tilting his small face up to me, full of a resentment that felt too old for him. "Every time you see Clara, you pull out this paper to fight with Dad. Clara already said that even if she had a baby, she wouldn't bother our family. But you almost pushed her down last time." As soon as the words were out of his mouth, he suddenly shoved me hard. The strength in his small body was surprising. I stumbled back, landing awkwardly on the edge of the bed, his words crashing into my skull like heavy stones. "Clara. Baby." Pushed her down. My gaze fell back to the paper. The 3 bold words at the top finally registered, stabbing into my consciousness. "Divorce agreement." In the next instant, those words seemed to blaze red. A searing pain exploded in the center of my forehead, and a floodgate opened in my mind. A torrent of memories, sharp, bitter, and overwhelming, poured in. They weren't my memories, not my 19-year-old self's, but they were undeniably mine. I saw a beautiful, sharp-faced woman with a mocking smile. Clara. Married. An actress. Leo's mistress. The memories were a suffocating net. I saw her walking boldly into this very house, welcomed happily by my own son. I saw myself, a future version of me, hollow-eyed and dressed in frumpy clothes, watching from the kitchen. I heard Ben declare, "Aunt Clara is my guest." "Mom, you're being so rude." I felt the gut-wrenching horror of learning Clara was pregnant, just months after Leo had sworn he had ended it. I heard my son, the child I had given everything to, look me in the eye and say, "Mom, you really do seem crazy." The agony from those memories closed around my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I fell to my knees, gasping. A flicker of worry crossed Ben's face, but it was gone in a second, replaced by a stubborn little snort. That very day, according to the memories, Clara had come here, rubbing her still flat belly with arrogant pride. Pathetic, she'd whispered to me. He said he'd block me from public view. Yet behind your back he quietly patched things up. Oh, and the new gated estate on Northcrest Drive. Surely you couldn't buy a unit there, right? Leo told the developer to give me one of the houses, saying it was a gift for the baby I'm carrying. The humiliation was a live wire, etching itself across my face. My 31-year-old self had carried this, had borne it until she broke. I was here now. My 19-year-old soul, which had never known pregnancy or long-term sacrifice, felt the sting of the betrayal, but not the weight of the years of bitterness. The resentment was faded secondhand. But the fury was fresh. I gripped Ben's small wrist. "Ben," I hissed, my voice low and dangerous, a tone I never knew I possessed. "Who taught you to talk to your mother like that?" The 31-year-old me would have never scolded him. She always blamed herself. But I saw the shock in his eyes. He'd never been confronted like this. Startled, he trembled and his eyes immediately welled up. The next second he sank his teeth into the back of my hand hard enough that I cried out and let go. He cried and screamed, the words clearly a well-rehearsed weapon. "I hate you, Mom. You're crazy. You're not my mother. I don't need you to be my mom." In the old memories, every time I heard that, my first reaction was terror. I would hold him tightly, choking out apologies. "I'm sorry, baby. Mom wasn't good enough. Please don't despise me." But now I only looked at him coldly, the sting of his bite throbbing on my hand. "Do you think I'm so desperate to be your mother?" His face flushed with real anger now. He was used to winning these confrontations. He thrust his chest out, a tiny bantam rooster. "You're just a coward who cries about divorce every day. Only so Dad will look at you one more time. Yet you never actually dare to do it." Though my spirit felt unburdened, my body flooded with a pain that was decades in the making. Right then a deep, cold voice sounded at the bedroom door. "Ben Miller, who gave you the right to speak like that?" I looked up and met the gaze of the man leaning against the doorframe. It was Leo. But it wasn't. The boy I had left in the hallway was gone. This man was taller, broader, his youthful softness carved away into hard, composed lines. He had just come from somewhere formal. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his sleeves rolled up to his biceps, a suit jacket draped over his wrist. He strode in, grabbed Ben by the arm, his face expressionless. "Don't let me hear you say another word like that to your mother," he said, his voice devoid of all the warmth I remembered. "I'm confiscating all your toys for a week." Ben hiccuped, pressed his lips together and fell silent, cowed by his father's authority. Leo's eyes flicked to me, then down to the divorce papers splayed open on the floor. "What are you playing at now?" he asked, the faint smell of alcohol clinging to him. "You've been flipping this paper back and forth for years. This copy's worn out. I'll have the lawyer print you a new one tomorrow." He kept his tone casual, but then it hardened, cutting me off. "If you ever dare to actually file this, remember, Ben's life will be worse than anyone's." The image of that teenage boy with a basketball, his shy, fluttering confession, blurred until I could no longer see it. In front of me stood a stranger, a hardened, ruthless man. I stared at him and without warning, the 19-year-old's instinct for self-preservation took over. I swung my hand to slap him. I didn't understand. The 31-year-old me would have taken it, internalized it, sunk deeper into her spiral. But I wouldn't. My hand never connected. He caught my wrist in a grip of iron, his face darkening for a moment before softening into a mask of patronizing concern. His fingers ran along my wrist and squeezed my palm as if he was afraid I would pull away. "Don't scare our child," he said, his voice a low, forced calm. "Haven't we said enough? Let the past be the past. From now on, let's live properly. In my heart there's only you. Always has been, always will be." Looking at that face, now somehow more handsome and yet utterly repulsive, I felt sick. I bent down, picked up the divorce papers without looking at him and walked out of the room. His knuckles were white where he gripped the doorframe, watching me go. He stood motionless. Behind him, Ben, hearing the scolding, whimpered. "Mom scolds me. Later when you feed me, I won't eat a bite." Leo clicked his tongue, frowned, and glanced at him. The boy gripped the hem of his shirt and fell completely silent. "Calm down," Leo said in a measured tone, then placed a hand on Ben's head and guided him out. I didn't look back. I walked into the grand, silent hall, the divorce agreement clutched in my hand like a lifeline. I had woken up in a nightmare, but I was finally awake. The grand hall was a monument to a life I didn't recognize. Polished marble floors reflected the cold gleam of recessed lighting. High ceilings echoed with a silence that felt accusing. This wasn't a home, it was a beautifully decorated cage. The divorce papers in my hand were no longer just a prop in a tired argument. They were my ticket out. I could hear the muffled sounds from the bedroom hallway, Leo's low, placating tone, Ben's petulant whines. They were a closed circuit, a dynamic I had no intention of rejoining. My 19-year-old heart was pounding, not with love or fear but with a clear, cold purpose. The 31-year-old Emma was dead. She had drowned in a sea of bitterness and sacrifice. I was the ghost she had summoned to haunt this house until I was free. I walked to a large, ornate mirror hanging in the entryway. The woman who stared back was a stranger. Her body was draped in an outdated, shapeless dress. Long, lank hair hung around a pale, makeup-free face. Her eyes, my eyes, were wide and hollow like a walking corpse. My fingers touched the cold glass. How? I whispered, my voice cracking. How did I become like this? I forced myself to stand there and piece together the fragments of the last 12 years. Before I could even finish college, Leo's family's company had suffered a catastrophic blow. He, the spoiled heir, had refused to accept defeat and started from scratch. I remembered 2007, the stock market booming like never before. It had been a gamble, a terrifying leap. I'd poured in every penny of my own meager savings and stood by him. We had pulled out just in time, our capital multiplied many times over. That money became the foundation of what was now Leo's empire, Apex Ventures. Those early years, we had carried everything together. Enduring scornful glances in boardrooms, returning to a cramped, sunless basement apartment that smelled of damp and determination. I would hold his exhausted body in that darkness, whispering to myself, we'll get out of here one day. And we did. The company grew. The money poured in. But the house grew emptier. A specific memory surfaced, sharp and painful. Leo, at 27, invited back to our alma mater as a successful alumnus. He was young, brilliant, strikingly handsome. During the Q&A, a bold girl with a bright laugh grabbed the microphone. Do you have a girlfriend? Leo had smiled, a practiced, charming thing, and raised his left hand. The simple wedding band I had chosen myself glinted on his finger. No, he'd said, and the crowd had chuckled. I've been married for 3 years. The girl, Lucy Lynn, had laughed, half joking, half serious. In the future, anyone could say the same. Get married. Get divorced. It's everywhere. Then she'd bowed, a playful, childish gesture. Sorry, senior. Don't take it seriously. I just like to joke around. Leo's expression had stayed calm, but at the end he had glanced at her. She had lifted her chin, satisfied, and sat down. At the time, I, heavily pregnant and already being eased out of the company, had brushed it off. Not until later did I learn her name. By the time I found out, she had gone from intern to Leo's personal secretary. The scene I witnessed myself was burned into my memory. Opening his office door to find her draped over his shoulder, intimately close. Leo didn't push her away. Just let her. When she saw me, Lucy jumped up, startled. Oh, Emma, you're here. Clutching my swollen belly, a pain like a vice had crushed my chest. I stumbled out. A month later, a humiliating photo arrived on my phone. Leo asleep, his head in Lucy's lap, in the exact same position he'd once rested in mine. The shock sent me into premature labor, bringing Ben into the world too soon. Afterward, Leo had sworn on his life that nothing happened. He fired Lucy, stayed day and night outside the delivery room, a picture of contrite terror. I had lain on that hospital bed, my eyes fixed on the tiny, fragile face in the cradle, and thought, if only this child had never been born. The irony was a knife twisting in my gut. The child I had sacrificed everything for, the one I had prayed would be safe and sound, had become a blade he wielded against me. I looked at the woman in the mirror. A slow, steady light began to return to my eyes. The 31-year-old Emma was dead. But she had called me here with all her pain and all her memories for a reason. To pull her out of the abyss. I turned from the mirror. I walked back into the bedroom I had shared with a stranger, but I didn't see the opulence anymore. I saw a crime scene. Methodically, I tidied the room, brushing out my tangled hair until it was smooth, tying it back into a severe, neat ponytail. I changed out of the frumpy dress and into a simple pair of jeans and a black sweater I found in the closet. The difference was subtle, but to me it was everything. I was shedding a skin. When I pushed the bedroom door open and stepped back into the hall, the air felt different. Lima, the housekeeper, was puttering nearby, a familiar, almost dismissive look on her face. "Lima," I said, my voice even. "Make me some noodles. I'm hungry." She fidgeted with her apron, hesitating. "It's so late, ma'am. Do you really want me to open the kitchen now?" I turned my head, meeting her eyes with a stare I didn't know I possessed. It was cold and flat. "Can you cook them or not? If not, then don't bother coming in tomorrow," she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear. "My salary comes from the boss. He hasn't said I'm fired." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Do you think if I tell Leo the first want you gone he won't listen? If I don't even have the authority to handle something this small, then go ahead. Try me." I didn't wait for a reply. I walked to the vast dining table and sat down, my posture straight. My unblinking gaze forced her to lower her eyes. She bowed her head quickly and hurried into the kitchen. A bowl of noodles was placed in front of me soon after. I was truly hungry, but I ate slowly, deliberately, reclaiming this space, this right, one bite at a time. The clock on the wall ticked, its pendulum swinging rhythmically. At exactly 10 p.m., it chimed, a clear ringing sound. A habit, a memory flickered in my mind. Every night at this hour, as long as Ben was awake, I would tell him a bedtime story. It was a ritual, a tether the old Emma had clung to. I lowered my head and continued eating at my own pace. A while later, the door to Ben's room creaked open. He stood there, holding a picture book, his small face a mixture of hesitation and expectation. He puffed out his chest, trying to look magnanimous. "Fine," he announced. "I'm not mad at you anymore. Tonight you can still tell me a story. Just hurry up when you're done eating. If it's too late, I'll be mad again." I glanced at him once, then dropped my gaze back to my noodles, saying nothing. To be honest, compared to the 31-year-old Emma who had lived through years of motherhood, I felt little real affection for this child. The bond had been poisoned, and I had not been here to build it. He was a stranger who shared my face. Ben's face fell. The performance hadn't worked. "If you don't tell me, then forget it," he snapped, his voice rising with real anger. "Even if you want to later, I won't listen to a single word." The door slammed shut, the sound echoing in the vast, silent hall. My chopsticks paused in midair, but I didn't move. I took a final sip of the broth and set the spoon down. Lima, wiping a nearby table, couldn't help herself. "Ma'am, you shouldn't go too far. Fighting with the young master only ends with you begging him again. Anyway, why do this? You'll only push him further away." Unlike the other staff, Lima had been here the longest, a front-row witness to my humiliation. Betrayed by my husband, abandoned by my son. She had seen me as a hollow lady of the house, a title with no power. I wiped my mouth with a linen napkin, lifted my head and looked straight at her. The decision was already made, cold and hard in my gut. Before I left, she would be gone too. Leo didn't come home that night. A message came through his secretary in the morning. "Urgent company matters." Clearly, he was giving me space to calm down, confident in the pattern of my return. Using that space, I called the secretary myself. "Lima is no longer required at the residence," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Please arrange her dismissal and final payment." The matter was handled with a swiftness that surprised even me. By the next morning, when I walked into the kitchen, Lima was gone. A new, kind-faced woman in a crisp uniform stood in her place. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Mrs. Walsh. Breakfast is ready. Would you like me to take the young master to school? I've also prepared his lunch." Ben, still in his pajamas, ran into the room and threw his arms around my waist, the drama of the previous night seemingly forgotten. "Mom, today I want to wear the blue shirt. And for lunch it has to be sesame fried chicken." Before, the old Emma had done everything herself. Studied for a nutrition certificate, cooked every meal, delivered it to his school, watched him eat. It was her entire identity. This time I gently but firmly peeled his arms from me. "Let Mrs. Walsh help you get dressed." Once he was ready, backpack on, he lingered by the front door for a long time, his small face confused. "Mom," he asked, his voice small, Aren't you taking me to school today? I didn't look up from the tablet where I was already searching for apartment listings. No. And don't use the family driver either. From now on, Mrs. Walsh will take you. He stared at me, his bottom lip trembling, then stomped out, the door closing with a definitive click. My packing was minimal. I took only what I had arrived with 7 years ago. A single suitcase of clothes that were now laughably out of style, and the divorce papers. As I wheeled the suitcase through the grand foyer, Mrs. Walsh hurried after me. Ma'am, where are you going? Why are you bringing luggage? Will you be back for lunch? I was planning to make your favorite dish. I stopped, looked back at the cold, gleaming house once, then turned away, my gaze fixed ahead. I won't be back, I said, my voice clear and steady. Don't prepare meals for me anymore. Pulling my suitcase behind me, I walked down the manicured driveway and didn't look back. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address of an apartment I had rented downtown. The rent was astronomical, $70,000 a month. I swiped my card without blinking. This money, the fruit of those early years of struggle that felt both like yesterday and a lifetime ago, was now my weapon. My freedom. The apartment was sleek, modern, and blessedly empty. It held no memories, no ghosts. I stood in the center of the living room, the city sprawling beneath me, and took a deep, clean breath. The 19-year-old girl was terrified. But the 31-year-old woman's memories were her armor. I remembered a career, a sharpness of mind that had been dulled by domesticity. I remembered that one achievement, pulled at random from that past life, would put me far ahead of most people. I opened my laptop. My fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up an old portfolio, drafting a new resume. I was not just leaving a marriage. I was reclaiming a self that had been buried alive. The first step had been taken. The path ahead was unknown, but for the first time in a long time it was mine. The silence in my new apartment was a living thing. It wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of the mansion, but a clean, empty canvas. For the first 24 hours I did nothing but breathe it in. I ordered takeout, slept for 12 hours straight, and stared at the city lights until they blurred into streaks of gold. I was a diver who had just surfaced from the crushing depths, and my body and soul needed to remember what it felt like not to be under pressure. On the second morning, the fear set in. The 19-year-old me was screaming that this was all a colossal mistake. I had no real plan, no job, and I was burning through a finite amount of money at an alarming rate. The 31-year-old's memories were a guide, but they were also a minefield of pain and insecurity. I had to move before paralysis set in. My resume felt like an artifact from another life. It spoke of a sharp, ambitious university student with a knack for market analysis and a promising future. It ended abruptly 7 years ago. How could I explain that gap? Raising a family sounded like a euphemism for, I forgot how to be a person. I polished it until it shone, highlighting the early gritty years building Apex Ventures with Leo. I framed it not as a hiatus, but as hands-on experience in startup growth, finance, and management. It was a stretch, but it was all I had. I sent it out to a dozen media and analytics firms. The first few rejections were swift and brutal. Then an invitation for an interview at Nexus Dynamics, a rising firm in new media. The name rang a faint, dissonant bell in the back of my mind, but I couldn't place it. The office was everything Leo's corporate temples were not. Open plan, buzzing with youthful energy, walls painted in bold colors. The final round was with the CEO herself. I smoothed down my new professional blazer, the first fashionable item I'd bought for myself in years, and stepped into the corner office. And froze. A little girl with 2 messy ponytails and a glittery princess dress was sitting on the lush carpet, busily trying to unwrap a piece of candy. When she noticed me, she looked up and smiled, a gap-toothed, heart-stoppingly sweet thing. She held out the successfully unwrapped candy. Share one with me, Auntie. Here, have a candy. I was so disarmed I took it automatically. Thank you. At that moment, the inner door opened and I immediately recognized the woman who walked in. The memory slammed into me, vivid and clear. A charity gala, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a laugh that could cut glass, standing next to her much older husband, the heir to the Vu conglomerate. Madame Olivia Vu. I had been forced to memorize these people, their private matters and hobbies, to help Leo navigate their social world. She wore a neat, powerful business suit now, her long chestnut hair curled and falling over one shoulder. She placed a hand on her hip, her red lips parting. Call me Sue Owens, she said, her voice crisp. I'm divorced now. I recovered quickly, dipping my head in a nod. Yes, C.O. Owens. The interview was unlike any I'd ever had. She seemed pleased with my portfolio and the writing samples I'd pulled from the depths of my memory, but her gaze was probing. It's good work, Ms. Reed. But let's be frank. She leaned forward. Compared to Apex Ventures, my firm is in a completely different league. Why here? Why not just go work for your husband's company? The question hung in the air. I could have lied, crafted a story about seeking new challenges. But the clean, honest air of this office, the directness in her eyes, demanded truth. I'm actually preparing for a divorce, I said, my voice steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. Olivia Owens didn't even blink. She just raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, a flicker of something, understanding perhaps, in her eyes. She asked no more about it. The little girl, Nora, tugged at my sleeve. Auntie Olivia, let me introduce you. This is my daughter, Nora. I was briefly stunned. In the world I came from, winning custody from a family like the Vus was virtually unheard of. This woman was far more formidable than I had ever realized. Perhaps it was that shared understanding of shattering the gilded cage. As the interview wrapped up, Olivia became almost magnanimous. When she learned I was serious about the divorce, she offered help, scribbling a name and number on a card. Samuel Cross, she said. The best divorce lawyer in the city. He's never lost a case. He's also obscenely expensive. She gave me a wry smile. If you're short on cash, I can advance your salary. I got the job. The relief was so profound my knees felt weak. I had a lifeline. An income. A path. That evening, as I was unpacking the few boxes I'd had delivered, my phone rang. It wasn't a number I knew, but I knew who it was. The silence from him had been a calculated part of the pattern, and I had just broken it. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. On the fourth try I answered, saying nothing. Emma. Leo's voice was a low, controlled vibration. He was silent for so long I thought the line had gone dead. Just as I was about to hang up, he spoke again. Go out, rent a place, find a job, and live properly. Why expect others to serve you? Why make life hard for yourself? I really don't understand what you're trying to start. The condescension was a familiar toxin. Life properly. According to his script. We've already talked about Clara Reed, he continued, his voice tightening. Why do you keep using her as an excuse? Take whatever you want. Take my life if you must. It's ridiculous. A cold fury ignited in my chest. It's not an excuse, Leo. It's the reason. And I don't want your life. I want half of what we built. A harsh laugh crackled down the line. We built. You've been playing housewife for years, Emma. You have no idea what it takes to run that company now. The memories surged, unbidden. The early years of Apex weren't just his. I remembered the late nights, the desperate pitches, the time I spent a month meticulously researching a rival company's weak spot, providing Leo with the leverage he needed to secure a crucial deal. He had called me his secret weapon. Now I was just the woman who played house. You'd be surprised, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. But my lawyer can discuss the details of my contributions with you. The word lawyer was a tripwire. Lawyer, he snarled, the controls snapping. You hired a lawyer. Who? That piece of trash Samuel Cross? He's been waiting for this, hasn't he? I was stunned into silence. How did he know? The paranoid part of my brain, the part forged in the fires of his betrayals, wondered if he was having me followed. Stay away from him, Emma. Leo's voice was a low, venomous threat. You have no idea what you're playing with. I hung up. My hands were trembling. I looked at the card Olivia had given me. Samuel Cross. The name was familiar, but I couldn't place it. I pushed the feeling aside. Leo was trying to get inside my head as he always did. I wouldn't let him. The next day, I went to the address Olivia had given me for Samuel Cross's office. It was in a sleek, modern high-rise, all glass and steel, a world away from the old money opulence of Leo's legal team. I sat in the minimalist waiting room, stirring a coffee I didn't drink, my nerves stretched taut. The door to the inner office opened and a man strode out. He was tall, with a lean, athletic build that his expensive suit did little to conceal. His hair was dark, his features sharp and intelligent, and his eyes, His eyes were a piercing, cool blue that I recognized with a jolt that felt like a physical blow. Jason Tong. Not Samuel Cross. Jason Tong. My mind catapulted back to high school. The perpetual rival. The boy who was always just one step behind me, his gaze a mixture of intense rivalry and something else I could never quite decipher. He had been brilliant, poor, and fiercely proud. He'd shown up at my wedding to Leo wearing a black suit and a red tie so vibrant it seemed to mock the subdued palette of the event. Leo had been insanely jealous for weeks. And now here he was. The famous divorce lawyer. He looked at me and there was no surprise in his eyes. Only a grim, focused intensity. He'd been expecting me. Emma, he said. His voice was deeper than I remembered, but it still held that same sharp edge. We sat in his office, the expanse of his polished desk between us. For almost half an hour he let me sit in silence, flipping through a file. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. Finally he looked up, his expression one of pure, unvarnished impatience. Emma, he said, slamming the file shut. The sound made me jump. Are you going to divorce or not? The directness was a slap. To be caught in such a miserable state by him, of all people, was a fresh layer of humiliation. My mind flashed back to a memory from university, a chance encounter where he'd looked at me with cold disdain and said, "Your taste in men is really pathetic." I drew a deep breath, steeling myself. I would not be cowed by him. Yes, I said, meeting his piercing gaze. I'm divorcing. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw the ghost of a smile touch the corner of his lips before it vanished. He cleared his throat. All right then. Regarding assets and custody, what do you want? The assets that belong to me, not a single one can be missing, I said, my voice firm. Of course, if Leo makes things difficult, I might compromise a little. His fingers paused over a section of the form. And custody? I fell silent, the weight of the question pressing down on me. I saw Ben's resentful face, heard his cruel words. The child doesn't like me, I finally said, the admission tasting like ash. I don't want custody. He hesitated, his sharp eyes studying me. Fine, he said, his tone unreadable. I'll fight for every penny you're owed. After all, that bastard cheated first and the evidence is obvious. He looked up, his expression suddenly stern. Forgive me. I was born hating injustice. When I see it, I can't help cursing people out. I didn't mind. In fact, his fury on my behalf was a strange comfort. The evidence exists, but it isn't much. I'll gather more. He cut me off with a sharp glance. That's my job. You don't need to worry. There was something in his eyes then, a strange, intense light that reminded me of the way he'd looked at me the day I married Leo. A look I had been too blinded by Leo's son to ever truly see. That night, my phone buzzed incessantly with WeChat notifications from Jason. They were all reminders to send him documents, financial records, anything I could find. Past midnight on the dot, another message came through. The top-tier lawyer was still working. No wonder he was so successful. I yawned, sent the last of what I had, and collapsed into bed. Almost immediately my phone buzzed again. Jason, still awake? I was too exhausted to answer. A moment later, a second message popped up, and then before I could even read it properly, it was withdrawn. I stared at the message withdrawn notification, a strange curiosity cutting through my fatigue. What had he said? I fell asleep with the phone in my hand, the ghost of his unsent message hanging in the dark. The plan was simple, a mantra I repeated to myself in the sterile quiet of my new apartment. Step 1. Secure a job. Done. Step 2. Hire a lawyer. Done, albeit with a complication named Jason Tong. Step 3. Let the legal machinery grind against Leo's fortress until it yielded my freedom and my fair share. But Leo had never been one to play by a script he didn't write himself. A week into my new life, I was leaving the Nexus Dynamics office, the evening air a cool balm after a day of intense focus. The work was challenging, pulling on mental muscles I hadn't used in years, and the satisfaction was a drug. For a few hours a day, I wasn't Leo's betrayed wife or Ben's failed mother. I was Emma Reed, analyst. And then I saw him. Leaned against the sleek black car parked directly at the curb, right outside my building. Leo. The casual pose was studied, but the evidence of his turmoil was scattered at his feet, a small constellation of cigarette butts. His head snapped up as soon as I stepped out, his eyes, bloodshot and shadowed, locking onto me. He strode forward, cutting off my path. Emma, he said, his voice gravelly and hard. We need to talk. Seriously. The familiar scent of his cologne mixed with smoke triggered a wave of nausea. I pushed down the sour fear rising in my throat and kept my expression a mask of ice. Of course, I replied, my tone dripping with false courtesy. My lawyer will be happy to schedule a proper discussion with you. I believe his assistant has already reached out. His jaw tightened. I'm not talking to that vulture. I'm talking to you. My wife. I'm not your wife. I'm your opponent. I took a step to move around him, but he shifted, blocking me again. Everything you've earned over these years, I continued, my voice dropping, not a dime less will you keep from me? The 31-year-old Emma might have pleaded, bargained, wept. But the 19-year-old soul at my core, fortified by the older woman's pain, was a creature of pure, cold survival. I would not be cheated. Not again. Leo's eyes darkened, the controlled mask slipping to reveal the raw provocation beneath. A low, humorless laugh escaped him. Emma, he said, a dangerous smile playing on his lips. You've grown bold. You dare bring that piece of trash's name into this. That piece of trash. He didn't even have to say Jason's name. The venom was reserved for him alone. I realized with a start that Leo's seemingly unreadable composure had two pressure points. His public reputation and Jason Tong. The poor, brilliant boy who had somehow, against all odds, become a threat. His name is Attorney Tong, a voice said from behind me, sharp and clear as shattering glass. And you will address him as such. I turned. Jason was standing there, looking haggard as if he hadn't slept, yet immaculate from his perfectly styled hair to his polished shoes. He carried a thick stack of files under his arm, a soldier arriving with his ammunition. He was even more dazzling now than he had been in his youth, all lean intensity and focused power. He didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on Leo, his tone a blade. Vice President Miller, mind your language. For the record, I am Attorney Jason Tong, the lawyer representing Ms. Reed in this divorce. He finally turned his head, his blue eyes meeting mine, decisive and calm. Emma, let's go. Don't waste words on people who only work against us. It was the dismissal in Jason's tone, the sheer authority, that broke Leo's final thread of control. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist with a force that felt like it would crack bone. It was a declaration. You cannot escape me. He leaned in slightly, his gaze passing over my shoulder to Jason. A smirk, cold and arrogant, flickered on his mouth. Jason, Leo said not loudly but with every word dripping with contempt. You've waited for this day a long time, haven't you? He paused, his eyes sweeping over my face, his confidence a palpable, ugly thing. Too bad, he added. Your golden lawyer reputation will be stripped away by me. Jason's shirt fluttered in the faint breeze. His face was a study in controlled neutrality, but I saw the ripple in his eyes, the struggle to contain a deeper, hotter emotion. Emma, he said, his voice low, forcing his attention back to me. I prepared a lot of material last night. Do you want to review it now? We can go over it at my office. It was a lifeline, a professional excuse to extract me. But before I could take it, another car door snapped open. A small, furious figure burst out and launched himself at Jason, shoving him hard. Don't come near my mom. Ben shrieked, planting himself between me and his father. His young face was flushed with a fury that was not his own, a perfect mirror of Leo's. He glared up at Jason. Uncle doesn't have a wife. Okay. The scene was so perfectly staged, so manipulative, it took my breath away. Leo had brought our son to a legal confrontation. He had used him as a shield, a weapon. Jason, to his credit, didn't flinch or get angry. He simply bent down to Ben's level, his expression calm. How do you know I don't have a wife? He asked, his voice even. That's enough, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. My wrist was still trapped in Leo's vice-like grip. I looked directly at him, my gaze unwavering. Think carefully about this divorce. If you can't reconcile yourself to a fair settlement, I won't hesitate to use the full force of the law. I finally wrenched my wrist free, the skin already blooming red. I didn't spare Ben another glance. But Leo, with a gentle, almost paternal nudge, pushed him to stand directly in front of me. Ben looked up, his bravado crumbling, his eyes rimmed with sudden, real tears. Mom, he whimpered, his voice small and lost. Mrs. Walsh's cooking hasn't been good lately. I've been skipping meals. The manipulation was so transparent, yet the part of me that had carried him, birthed him, ached at the sight of his genuine distress. But the larger part, the part that remembered his coldness, his betrayal, remained hardened. I looked at him not as his mother, but as an observer of a very clever tactic. "Then tell Dad to change the housekeeper, Ben," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "I am not your nanny." At that moment, a cherry-red sports car pulled up to the curb. The door flew open and a little girl in a sparkling princess dress came running out. It was Nora, Olivia's daughter. "Auntie Emma," she called, her voice a crystal bell. "Mommy says come home and eat with me." The simple, innocent invitation was a stark contrast to the toxic drama unfolding on the sidewalk. I felt a genuine smile touch my lips for the first time in what felt like years. I was about to bend down and take her hand when Ben exploded. With a wail of pure, jealous rage, he shoved our hands apart. "You don't have a mom," he screamed at Nora, tears streaming down his face. "So why are you holding my mom's hand?" Nora, unfazed, simply tilted her head, her bright eyes wide and innocent. "You're so funny. I have both a mom and an aunt." "I know. Aunt Emma doesn't need you anymore. Soon you'll be the one without a mom." The words, spoken with a child's brutal honesty, hung in the air. Ben's crying intensified, turning into ragged, heartbroken sobs. It was Leo who moved then. He swept Ben up into his arms, the boy burying his face in his father's shoulder. Leo's eyes met mine over our son's heaving back. The hurry, the resentment was gone. Instead there was a terrifying, calm depth to them, a chilling certainty. "Emma," he said, his voice soft as he gently brushed away Ben's tears. "You see him cry like that. You hear him call for you and yet you remain indifferent. You are cruel." He paused, letting the accusation settle. "But I don't believe you would abandon our child. Not truly. One day you will regret this." He turned and walked away, carrying our sobbing son to his car. I watched them go, my heart a conflicted, aching mess. Regret? Would it come? Could the biological tie, the memory of risking my life to bring him into the world, be so easily severed? The doctors had told me after the traumatic birth that I would never be able to have another child. Ben was my one and only. And that, perhaps, was the cornerstone of Leo's unshakable belief. He thought my biology would betray my resolve. In the days that followed, Leo never showed up at my office again. But Ben did. Once or twice I caught a glimpse of a small, forlorn figure lurking near the lobby of my building, hastily hidden by a potted plant when he saw me looking. Another time, as I was walking to a lunch meeting, I saw him across the street, being taken to the park by Clara Reed. The moment Clara saw me, a slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. She slid her sunglasses off. "Emma, fancy seeing you here," she called, her voice syrupy sweet. She looked down at Ben, then back at me, her smile widening. "We're just having a little fun. Since you're so busy." Ben didn't look at me. He clung to Clara's hand, his small shoulders hunched. The message was clear. If I wouldn't be his mother, someone else was more than willing to step in. I didn't engage. I simply gave a curt nod and walked on, the image of my son with his father's mistress burning itself into the back of my eyelids. The game was ugly and Leo was a master player. He knew every one of my weaknesses, every hidden fracture in my heart. And he was using our son to hammer at them, one painful tap at a time. The sight of Ben with Clara became a ghost that haunted my new life. It flickered at the edge of my vision during meetings, its cold hand tightening around my throat as I tried to fall asleep. Leo's strategy was insidious, a psychological war fought with the one weapon he knew I couldn't armor myself against. But with every pang of maternal guilt, the 19-year-old rebel inside me grew louder, more furious. "He's using him. He is turning your child against you. Do not let him win." My refuge, ironically, became the law. Jason Tong was a force of nature in a tailored suit. He worked with a ferocious, relentless energy that left me in awe. Late-night document reviews in his stark, modern office became our new normal. The air would be thick with the scent of coffee and highlighter ink. The only sounds the rustle of paper and the steady tap of his fingers on a keyboard. "He's stalling," Jason said one evening, pushing a hand through his already disheveled hair. He'd discarded his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing lean, corded forearms. "His lawyers are throwing up procedural roadblocks. They're trying to drain you financially and emotionally, hoping you'll give up." "I won't," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I was looking at a spreadsheet of Apex Ventures' early financials, numbers I remembered helping to Krunak. He knows I won't. Jason looked at me, his sharp blue eyes studying my face in the glow of the laptop screen. No, he agreed softly. I don't think you will. There was something in his tone, a respect that went beyond the professional that made my skin prickle. I looked away, focusing on the documents. We had proof of the affair, of course. Grainy photos from a private investigator, credit card statements for dinners and hotels, the transfer of the Northcrest Drive property to a shell corporation linked to Clara. It was sordid and humiliating, but in the world of high-stakes divorce, it was almost mundane. We needed more. We needed a smoking gun. He's hidden assets, Jason stated, tapping a finger on a complex corporate structure chart. A lot of them. He's been funneling money through offshore holdings and these subsidiary companies for years. It's a labyrinth. I know this one, I said, pointing to a company named Helios Holdings. The memory surfaced, clear and sharp. It was a pet project. He was trying to get into sustainable tech before it was mainstream. Lost a fortune for 3 years straight. I told him to cut his losses. Jason's gaze was intense. According to these records, Helios is now one of his most profitable ventures. He must have shifted assets into it once it turned a corner. Divorced it from the main company. A cold understanding settled in my gut. He hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been methodically cheating me for years, building a separate fortune in the shadows while I played the part of the dutiful, ignorant wife. We need to get into his personal electronic files, Jason said. His laptop, his cloud storage. The forensic accountant can only do so much with the paper trail. That's impossible. He's paranoid about security. A slow, predatory smile touched Jason's lips. It was a side of him I'd never seen, the street fighter from his youth, not the polished lawyer. Everyone has a weakness, Emma. Even Leo. A few days later, that weakness walked right into my office. I was gathering my things to leave when a timid knock came at my open door. Ben stood there looking small and lost, his school backpack hanging from one shoulder. My heart lurched. Mom, he whispered. Ben, what are you doing here? How did you get here? Mrs. Walsh. I told her I forgot my project at your house. He shuffled his feet, not meeting my eyes. I'm sorry. The apology was so unexpected it stole my breath. Sorry for what, Ben? For being mean. For what I said. His lower lip trembled. He's really mad. All the time. And Aunt Clara. She says you left because you don't love me anymore. The manipulation was so crude, so vicious, it made me see red. I knelt down, bringing myself to his eye level. Ben, listen to me. I left because of the things your father has done. It has nothing to do with how much I love you. Do you understand? He nodded, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. It was a heartbreaking sight. The hardened little tyrant was gone, replaced by a confused and frightened little boy. I brought you this, he said, digging into his backpack. He pulled out a small framed photo. It was of the two of us from what looked like a few years ago. We were in a garden, I was kneeling behind him, my arms wrapped around his small chest, and we were both laughing. It was a version of myself I barely remembered. A version of us that felt like a dream. My throat tightened. Thank you, Ben. He lingered for a moment, then turned to go. As he did, something fell from the unzipped pocket of his backpack. It was a sleek black USB drive. Ben, you dropped this, I said, picking it up. He glanced back, a flicker of something, guilt? Fear, in his eyes. It's nothing. Just a game. Then he hurried away. I stood there holding the cold metal drive. A game? Leo didn't allow video games on anything but a tightly controlled console. My lawyer's instincts, the ones Jason was helping me resurrect, screamed at me. This was no game. I didn't go home. I drove straight to Jason's office, the USB drive feeling like a live coal in my purse. He was still there, of course, surrounded by towers of files. What is it? He asked, seeing the look on my face. I placed the drive on his desk. Ben brought this to me. He said it was a game, but... Jason didn't hesitate. He plugged it into a secure, isolated laptop. The drive contained a single folder. He clicked it open. It was full of video files. Dozens of them. Their titles were dates. Jason clicked on the most recent one. The screen showed Leo's home office. It was from the security camera, the one he'd had installed after a break-in scare. The angle was high, showing his desk and a seating area. Leo was there and so was Clara. She wasn't posing or preening. She was pacing, her face contorted with anger. Ridiculous, Leo. How long am I supposed to wait? You said once she was out of the picture. She is out of the picture, Leo snapped, not looking up from his computer. Is she? Because you spend half your time trying to drag her back. Using that brat of yours to guilt-trip her. Clara spat. You promised me that house. You promised me a future. Not this limbo. Leo finally looked up, his expression cold. The house is yours. The money is yours. But my reputation is not. A messy divorce right now could sink the merger with Technova. I need to handle this carefully. Handle it? You're obsessed. You can't stand that she left you. Clara let out a sharp, ugly laugh. And the best part? She still doesn't know the truth, does she? Leo went very still. What are you talking about? The baby, Leo. Clara stopped pacing and leaned over his desk, her face filling the frame. I was never pregnant. It was a lie. A story we concocted to push her over the edge. And it worked. But you can't let go. You'd rather have your miserable, hateful wife back under your thumb than be free with me. The air left my lungs. I gripped the edge of Jason's desk to steady myself. Never pregnant. It had all been a calculated performance. A cruel, vicious lie designed to break me. On the screen, Leo's face was a stone mask. Get out, Clara. Gladly. She straightened up, a smirk of triumph on her face. But remember, Leo. I have copies of everything. The financial records you hid, the emails, and this little conversation. If you try to cut me out, I'll burn your whole world down. He flounced out. Leo sat motionless for a long moment after she left. Then he slowly lowered his head into his hands. The image of a defeated man. But I felt no pity. Only a cold, clarifying rage. Jason was already ejecting the drive, his movements precise and efficient. This is it, he said, his voice grim with satisfaction. This is everything. The admission of the fraud, the threat of blackmail, the confirmation of hidden assets. This doesn't just get you a divorce, Emma. This gets you everything. I stared at the frozen image on the screen. Leo, the master manipulator, outmaneuvered by his own mistress and his own son. Ben. Had he known what was on this drive? Had his apology been a cover, or was he, too, just a pawn in a game he couldn't understand? It didn't matter. The ghost had been given a body. The weapon had been delivered. The war was about to turn. The world outside Jason's office window was a blur of indifferent city lights. Inside, the air was still, charged with the aftershock of what we had just witnessed. The video wasn't just evidence. It was a demolition charge placed at the foundation of the life Leo had built. His infidelity, his financial deception, his cruel manipulation. All of it laid bare in Clara's venomous confession. I was never pregnant. Why? A story to push me over the edge. The initial seismic shock was giving way to a strange, cold calm. There was no more guesswork, no more gaslighting. The monster had a face and a voice, and it was recorded in high definition. Jason was already in motion, a general marshalling his forces. He copied the drive, securing the original in a safe. His fingers flew across his phone, firing off terse, encrypted messages to his forensic team and private investigator. This changes the entire landscape, he said, his voice low and focused. We're no longer negotiating a divorce. We're presenting terms of surrender. He'll have no choice. If this gets out, not only does his marriage end, his merger with Technova collapses, and he faces potential criminal charges for fraud and perjury. He looked at me, his blue eyes intense. Are you ready for this, Emma? The next 48 hours will be brutal. I met his gaze. The 19-year-old girl inside me was terrified. The 31-year-old woman was resolute. I've been living in brutal for years, Jason. I'm ready. He nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Good. I'm calling his lead counsel now. We're summoning him to a meeting tomorrow morning. No lawyers. Just you, him, and me. The call was brief and brutal. I could hear the sputtering indignation from Leo's lawyer through the phone. Jason cut him off. Tell your client this is not a request. It's a courtesy. If he is not in my office at 9 a.m. sharp, the attached video file will be released to the board of Apex Ventures and the financial press. His choice. He hung up. The die was cast. I didn't sleep that night. I paced my apartment, the ghost of Clara's laugh echoing in the silence. I thought of Ben. His tear-streaked face, the USB drive falling from his backpack. Had it been an accident? A desperate, unconscious act of rebellion against a father who used him as a tool? Or was it another layer of Leo's convoluted strategy? A move I was too exhausted to decipher? The questions circled like vultures, but they couldn't pierce the armor of my certainty. However it had come to me, the truth was now mine to wield. The next morning at 8:55 a.m., Leo strode into Jason's conference room. He looked like he hadn't slept either, but he wore his exhaustion like a weapon, his jaw set, his eyes burning with a cold fire. He was dressed for battle in a custom-made suit, every inch the powerful executive. He didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on Jason, who stood calmly at the head of the table. "This is an outrage, Tong," Leo began, his voice a low growl. "Sit down, Leo," Jason said, his tone conversational. He gestured to the large monitor on the wall. "We have a film to watch." He pressed play. Watching Leo watch his own downfall was a surreal experience. I saw the color drain from his face as Clara's voice filled the room. He flinched when she spat the words, "You promised me that house." His knuckles were white where he gripped the armrests. But it was the final revelation: I was never pregnant. That broke him. A sharp, involuntary sound like a wounded animal escaped his throat. His carefully constructed composure shattered. Small. The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute and heavy. Jason spoke first. "You will sign the divorce agreement as presented by Ms. Reed. You will transfer the full, uncontested share of the Marshall assets, including the previously hidden holdings in Helios and the Cayman accounts. You will retain primary physical custody of your son, with Ms. Reed having standard visitation rights. In return, this recording and all copies will be destroyed. You will have your divorce and you will have your company. That is the deal." Leo was silent for a long moment, staring at the blank screen as if it still held his ruin. Finally, he slowly turned his head and looked at me. It was the first time he had truly looked at me since this nightmare began. The arrogance was gone. The condescension was gone. All that was left was a raw, bewildered pain. "Why, Emma?" he whispered, his voice ragged. "We've known each other for 17 years. We built a life. A family. How can you do this?" The question was so divorced from reality it was almost laughable. "How can I do this?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "You lied to me. You cheated on me. You conspired with your mistress to drive me to a mental breakdown with a fake pregnancy. You turned my own son against me. And you ask me how I can do this." "It was a mistake," he burst out, surging to his feet. "A moment of weakness. Claire, she meant nothing. It was only ever you. It has always been only you." It was the same old song, but the music was broken. I saw it now for what it was. Not love, but possession. He couldn't stand that I had slipped his control. "You still want to blame me?" I stood up, meeting his gaze across the polished table. "You think because I didn't divorce you when Ben was born I gave you permission? We gave each other chances, Leo. You just didn't appreciate them." He sank back into his chair, defeated. The fight was gone. He was just a man in a very expensive suit, staring into the abyss he had dug for himself. "What about Ben?" he asked, his voice hollow. "He keeps calling for you when he's sick. Are you really that heartless?" It was the final, desperate pull on the one string he thought still held me. And for a moment it worked. A vision of my son, feverish and small, flashed before my eyes. But it was followed by the memory of his coldness, his cruelty, his declaration that I was crazy. "If Ben is ill," I said, my voice trembling only slightly, "and we have the money, hire the best doctor. But you know, his illness cannot be cured by me." It was the truth, and it was the most painful sentence I had ever spoken. The illness was his father's influence, a poison I was powerless to antidote from the outside. Leo stared at me, and in his eyes, I saw the final, chilling understanding. I was lost to him. Truly and completely. "Fine," he said, the word a dry leaf scraping against stone. He looked at Jason. "Draw up the papers. I'll sign them." He stood and walked out of the room without another word, his shoulders slumped. The door clicked shut and the room seemed to exhale. Jason turned to me. "It's over." The finality of it should have been a relief. It was a victory total and absolute. But as I stood there, the silence was filled not with triumph, but with a profound and echoing grief. I was mourning the boy I had loved in the sun-drenched hallway. I was mourning the mother I might have been. I was mourning the family that had never really existed outside of my own hopeful heart. Jason seemed to understand. He didn't offer empty congratulations. He simply gathered his files and said, "Let's get you out of here." We rode the elevator down in silence. As we stepped out into the bright lobby, I saw a familiar car idling at the curb. Leo was leaning against it, waiting. He'd regained a shred of his composure, but his face was a mask of bitter resignation. Jason moved to stand slightly in front of me, a protective gesture that was both professional and deeply personal. Leo's eyes, bloodshot and weary, moved from me to Jason. A cynical, knowing smile twisted his lips. "You waited for this day a long time, didn't you, Tong?" he said, his voice low. "To prod her into finally leaving me. What do you think you'll gain?" He took a step closer, his gaze sweeping over me with a final, possessive heat. "She won't believe in the marriage you crave. In the end, she'll be just like me." Jason didn't flinch. He stood his ground, his posture relaxed but unyielding. "Whatever role she's willing to give me," he said, his voice quiet but clear, "I'll accept it." The honesty in his words, the sheer lack of games, was like a key turning in a lock deep inside me. Leo heard it too. His smirk faded, replaced by a look of pure, undiluted hate. He knew he had lost on every possible front. He turned, got into his car and drove away. This time I knew it was for good. I stood on the sidewalk, the summer sun warm on my skin. The legal battle was won. The war was over. But as I watched his car disappear into the traffic, I felt the weight of the future settle on my shoulders. I was free. But I was also alone, standing in the rubble of my old life with no map for how to build a new one. The day I received the final divorce decree, the summer heat was a physical presence, thick and heavy, pressing down on the city. It felt like a cosmic joke, a deliberate echo of that sweltering afternoon 7 years ago when a single nod had set this entire chain of events in motion. I held the single sheet of paper in my hands, its official stamp and dry legalese feeling absurdly insignificant for the cataclysm it represented. It was over. Leo Miller was no longer my husband. The expected flood of emotion, triumph, grief, liberation didn't come. Instead, there was a vast, echoing quiet, a numbness that felt like the calm after a storm has ripped through and left nothing but debris. I had won. I was financially secure more than I had ever dreamed. I had my job, my apartment, my freedom. But the victory felt hollow, a castle built on the ashes of everything I had once believed in. In the weeks that followed, I tried to build a routine, a new life from the pieces that remained. Work was my anchor. At Nexus Dynamics, I threw myself into projects, my sharpness returning faster than I had anticipated. The analytical part of my brain, the part Leo had dismissed as a hobby, was now my greatest asset. Olivia watched my progress with a knowing, satisfied smile. We never spoke of the divorce directly, but a solid, unshakable friendship was forming in the space between our shared understanding of shattered gilded cages. Ben was the open wound that refused to heal. Our court-mandated visits were stilted, painful affairs. He was polite but distant, a little stranger who studied me with wary eyes. He'd ask questions about my apartment, my job, with a clinical curiosity that broke my heart. The connection, the easy intimacy from the photo he'd given me was gone. He was Leo's son through and through, and the wall between us felt higher and more impenetrable than ever. And then there was Jason. He didn't disappear after the legalities were concluded. He became a persistent, confusing presence in my new life. Our interactions were a strange dance of professional courtesy and something else, something unspoken that hummed in the space between us. He'd text about a minor, long-resolved clause in the settlement. He'd show up at my office with a forgotten document. One evening he happened to be at the same restaurant where Olivia, Nora, and I were having dinner. Nora, of course, squealed with delight and dragged him over to our table. "Working late, counselor?" Olivia had asked, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Always," he'd replied, but his eyes were on me. That night, after a few too many glasses of wine, the unspoken thing between us finally found a voice. We were on the balcony of my apartment, the city lights sprawling below us like a fallen galaxy. The night air was cool, a relief from the day's stifling heat. "You know, I said, the wine loosening my tongue. Olivia seems to think you have feelings for me. Jason, who was leaning against the railing, went very still. He didn't look at me. And what do you think? I think you feel responsible. You won a big case. You got your client everything she asked for. Now you're making sure the asset doesn't depreciate. He turned then, his face half in shadow. Is that what you think you are? An asset? What else would I be, Jason? The words came out harsher than I intended, fueled by wine and a deep, lingering hurt. A damsel in distress you finally rescued? A prize you won from Leo? No. The word was sharp, final. He took a step toward me. That's not it at all. Then what? I challenged, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. Why are you here? What do you want from me? He was close enough now that I could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. The air crackled with a tension that had been building for months, for years. When I was in 11th grade, he said, his voice low and rough, I sent you a love letter. The next day I saw you throw it in the trash. Unopened. Do you hate me that much, Emma? The question was so unexpected, so utterly disconnected from the present moment, it stole my breath. A memory, faint and dusty, surfaced. A plain white envelope shoved into my locker. I'd been so preoccupied with Leo, with the dizzying whirlwind of his attention, that I'd dismissed it without a second thought. I stared at him, the truth dawning. All this time. The rivalry, the intensity, the way he'd looked at me at my wedding. It hadn't been hatred. It had been this. No, I whispered, the fight draining out of me. I never saw any letter from you. I never even opened it. He pressed his lips together as if recalling the specific searing pain of that rejection. Then his expression softened, yielding to a vulnerability I had never seen in him before. Fine, he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Then let me write another one. This time you can't throw it away. The sheer, hopeless romance of it, coming from this sharp, cynical man, undid me completely. The armor I had built so carefully around my heart cracked. I let out a shaky breath, a half-laugh, half-sob. Where did you learn such clumsy pickup lines? They're so corny. He gave a soft, pained sound, but seized the chance to close the final distance between us. His hand came up, his fingers gently wrapping around my wrist. His touch was warm, sure. He didn't pull me closer, just held me there, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin of my inner wrist. Maybe they are, he murmured. But they're true. Then, slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and pressed his lips to my palm. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of reverence, an act of devotion so stark and honest it made my eyes sting with tears. His eyes never blinked, fixed on mine, and in their depths, I saw a timid, earnest longing, a deep affection, and a pitiable fear that I would reject him again. Those eyes were like a deep, cold lake, and I was trembling on the edge, ready to fall in. I didn't pull away. The dam broke. The numbness shattered, and in its place rushed a terrifying, exhilarating cascade of feeling. It wasn't the straightforward, sun-drenched love I'd felt for Leo. This was more complex, darker, born from shared battle scars and a long, patient wait. It was real in a way nothing had been real for a very long time. In the days and weeks that followed, Jason and I moved into uncharted territory. It was tentative and slow, a careful navigation of our shared past and our uncertain future. He was patient, letting me set the pace, understanding that my trust was a shattered thing that needed to be pieced back together with immense care. We were in my apartment one evening, side by side on the sofa, reviewing the final closed file of my divorce. It was a ritual, a way of putting the past to rest. His phone buzzed and he glanced at it, a frown creasing his brow. It's about Ben, he said quietly. My heart clenched. What is it? Leo, he neglected him. Left him with a nanny who didn't notice he was sick. He's got a high fever. They're at the hospital. The old instincts, the maternal panic surged instantly. I was on my feet, grabbing my purse. Which hospital? Jason stood too, placing a calming hand on my arm. I'll drive you. We drove in tense silence. When we arrived at the private children's wing, Leo was standing in the hallway outside Ben's room. He looked haggard, stripped of all his power and polish. When he saw me, his eyes flashed with a mixture of shame and defiance. I told you, he said, his voice chillingly calm. I told you if a child couldn't hold you, then to me you're no different than something disposable. the callousness of it, the sheer evil, broke the last vestige of any pity I might have held for him. I didn't think. I just acted. The sound of my hand connecting with his cheek echoed sharply in the sterile hallway. "You monster," I hissed, my whole body trembling with rage. He just sneered, rubbing his jaw. "Savagely defending the child you walked away from? How noble." It was Jason who stepped between us, his presence a solid wall of calm authority. "That's enough," he said to Leo, his voice low and dangerous. "The court will be hearing about this. You can explain your parenting philosophy to a family judge." We pushed past him into Ben's room. He was asleep, his small face pale and sweaty against the white pillow and four in his arm. The sight was a physical pain. I sat beside his bed, gently taking his small hot hand in mine. He stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. "Mom," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep and fever. "I'm here, baby," I whispered, brushing the hair from his forehead. "I'm right here." He didn't say anything else, just sighed and closed his eyes, his fingers tightening weakly around mine. It was the first time he had reached for me since I'd left. In that moment, surrounded by the beeping monitors and the scent of antiseptic, a new resolve crystallized within me. I couldn't force a relationship with my son. I couldn't erase the poison his father had fed him. But I could be a constant. I could be there whether he wanted me or not. I would not let Leo's cruelty be the final word on my motherhood. Looking at Ben's peaceful sleeping face and then at Jason who stood guard by the door, I finally understood. This wasn't about building a new life on the ashes of the old. It was about building something entirely new from the ground up. It would be harder and messier and there were no guarantees. But for the first time I was no longer looking back. I was ready to face whatever came next. The years that followed were not a fairy tale. They were messy, real, and often painfully slow. Freedom, I learned, was not a single triumphant moment but a daily practice. A practice of choosing myself, of building a life brick by brick, of learning to breathe without the weight of Leo's expectations on my chest. My career at Nexus Dynamics flourished. Olivia and I became an unstoppable team, our shared history of survival forging a bond stronger than any business contract. We built the company into a powerhouse, and the satisfaction of creating something that was truly mine was a balm on old wounds. Ben's recovery from his illness was the turning point in our relationship. The court, horrified by Leo's neglect, granted me increased visitation. Our time together was no longer a stilted, court-ordered obligation. Slowly, carefully we began to rebuild. It was like taming a wounded bird. There were setbacks, days when he would retreat into sullen silence, moments when a careless comment from Leo would undo weeks of progress. But he was trying, and so was I. We found a new rhythm, built on quiet afternoons reading, shared ice cream sundaes, and my steadfast presence, which was no longer conditional on his behavior or his father's whims. The love was still there, buried under the rubble. We were just learning how to dig it out together. Jason was my constant. The man who had once been my fiercest rival became my safest harbor. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic confession. Our relationship was a quiet, steady river, deep and strong. He never tried to replace Leo in Ben's life, instead becoming a steady, reliable presence. A friend who built elaborate Lego castles and always remembered his favorite flavor of pizza. With me he was patient and unwavering. He had seen me at my most broken and had not looked away. He loved the 19-year-old girl's fire that still flickered within me, and he respected the 31-year-old woman's scars. It was a love built on truth, and for the first time in my life I felt completely, unshakably known. One evening we were at his apartment. I was curled up on the sofa, reviewing a project proposal while he was at his desk finishing up some work. The domestic normalcy of it was a miracle I never took for granted. My phone buzzed, a notification from a news app. I absently clicked on it and my blood ran cold. Cole family empire declares bankruptcy. Once promising heir Leo Cole's latest venture collapses. There was a picture of Leo, looking a decade older than his years, being hustled past photographers, his face a mask of stunned defeat. A strange cocktail of emotions washed over me, not schadenfreude but a profound, weary sadness. The ghost of the boy in the hallway finally, truly faded away. "You okay?" Jason asked, his voice soft from across the room. He had seen the look on my face. I showed him the phone. He read the headline, his expression unreadable. He was always a gambler, he said finally. He never learned how to build something to last. Only how to acquire. He came over and sat beside me, pulling me into his arms. I rested my head on his shoulder, breathing in his familiar, clean scent. It's just sad, I whispered. I know, he said, and he held me while I mourned, not for the man Leo became, but for the boy he had been and for the life we had both lost. That night I fell asleep in Jason's bed, wrapped in the safety of his embrace. The last thought I had was a simple one. This is enough. This is more than I ever dreamed possible. When I opened my eyes, it was to a familiar water-stained ceiling. I blinked. Then I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wasn't in Jason's modern, minimalist bedroom. I was in my old dorm room. The stiff wooden bed, the faded poster on the wall, the smell of old books and instant noodles. Sunlight, harsh and young, streamed through the thin curtains. No. I scrambled out of bed, my legs weak, and stumbled to the small mirror hanging on the back of the door. Staring back at me was a 19-year-old girl. Her face was unlined, her eyes wide with sleep and confusion, her hair a messy, youthful tumble. There were no scars, no shadows of a broken marriage, no laugh lines earned from building a new life. A sob caught in my throat. It had all been a dream? A cruel, elaborate, heart-shatteringly vivid dream? The 7 years of marriage, the betrayal, the divorce, Ben's slow reconciliation, Olivia's friendship, Jason's love. Had it all been nothing more than a phantom life conjured by an anxious mind on the eve of a new relationship? The loss was so acute it felt like a physical amputation. I fell to my knees, clutching the edge of the sink, tears streaming down my face. I had lived a lifetime. I had fought my way out of hell and found heaven. And now it was gone. A knock came at the door. Emma? You up? It was my roommate. I wiped my face roughly, forcing myself to stand. Yeah. I'm up. I dressed on autopilot, my hands trembling. I had a date. Today was the day. Leo was picking me up. The thought made me nauseous. I walked to the window and looked down. And there he was. Just as I remembered him from the first time. Tall, lanky, leaning against his car, his face pale with worry and hope. The boy who would become my husband. The man who would break me. He saw me and his face lit up, that same sun-bright smile. He waved, beckoning me down. My mind was a whirlwind. It had been a dream. A warning. A gift. I walked downstairs on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. When I stepped out into the morning air, he rushed forward, his stormy eyes searching my face. Emma? What's wrong? Yesterday you clearly agreed. Why did you wake up and forget it all? His voice was tight with panic. Don't joke with me, please. I get it. You want more time, right? That's fine. We'll stay the way we were. I looked at him, at this boy I had once loved with my whole foolish heart. I could see the ghost of the man he would become. The possessiveness in his gaze, the desperation to control the narrative. The love I felt for him was still there, a faint, nostalgic echo. But it was buried under the visceral, bone-deep knowledge of the pain that lay ahead. The memory of his coldness, his betrayals, the sound of his voice calling me cruel as he held our crying son. It was all more real to me than this moment. It was the strangest sensation. I could be sharp and merciless with the 31-year-old Leo, but facing the 19-year-old version only filled me with a profound, aching pity. Leo, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It's not that I don't like you. His face flooded with relief. See? I knew. It's that from now on, I continued, cutting him off, I won't be with you. The relief vanished, replaced by stunned disbelief. What? What did I do wrong? Nothing. Yet. I took a step back, creating a space between us that felt like a chasm. I just know it's not the right path for me. For us. He didn't believe me. He thought I was sulking, playing hard to get. He clung to me for weeks, just as he had in my memories. He ran through the rain to bring me a kitten. He waited in line for hours to buy me a dish I'd once mentioned. He recalled every shared moment, trying to find the key that would unlock my old self. Finally, the proud boy's eyes filled with tears as he blocked my way on the path to the library. Emma, tell me, what did I do wrong? I'll change everything. I'll be whatever you want. As if drained of all strength, he sank to his knees on the damp concrete, wrapping his arms around my legs. Please don't leave me. I can't live without you. I looked down at his dripping black hair and for an instant I believed him. At least right now he was sincere. The memories of the future flooded me, not just the pain but the good moments too. The early struggles, the shared dreams. I saw him 2 years after graduation selling his blood, kneeling in humiliation to get money for my surgery when I was gravely ill. He had loved me in his twisted, broken way as if I were his very life. But so what? This time, given the chance to start over, I would never stake my entire life on that love again. It was a flame that burned too hot and too destructive. I gently pried his arms from around my legs. "I'm sorry, Leo," I said, and I meant it. "But my answer is no." I heard later that he attempted suicide, that he was nearly beyond saving. His mother, the dignified society lady who had never approved of me, came to persuade me. Her tone was gentle but I remained firm. Before leaving she only sighed. "It is Leo's misfortune." After that, I treated him as if he didn't exist. Following the map of my memories, I found Olivia Owens on the street. She was handing out flyers, a fragile yet resilient flower, cold and proud. I walked up to her, my heart pounding with a strange sense of déjà vu. "Let me buy you a coffee," I said. She frowned, confused. "What are you doing? I don't even know you." I paused, then smiled. "You will." Under my stubborn insistence, her very first cup of coffee was paid for by me. From then on, I often pestered her. And as for Victor, he was nowhere to be seen. And even if he did appear, I couldn't be bothered to care. The story followed its destined path, but I was now its author. In the years that came, relying on my memories, I seized investment opportunities again and again. In just a few short years, Olivia and I founded our company together. It grew stronger by the day, and Olivia became a dazzling, powerful woman, striding in high heels, busy counting money. She never mentioned Victor again. The man she later married treated her incredibly well, and his family cherished her for the strong, successful woman she was. One thing I didn't expect. In the second year of her marriage, she gave birth to a baby girl who, as she grew, looked exactly like Clara. When the little girl learned to talk, she would run over, candy in hand, and call me Aunt Emma. Each time my heart softened, the old ghost of bitterness finally laid to rest. As for Leo, even though I had once warned his mother, the Cole family still went bankrupt. He started his own business afterward but never succeeded. He was stuck, a gambler without the nerve to see his bets through, forever haunted by the one thing he couldn't acquire: me. I had put everything in order, but I still felt as though I'd forgotten something, until one night when the image of those fox-like, piercing blue eyes surfaced in my mind. I told myself his future was already brilliant and I shouldn't interfere. I had decided not to seek him out. Yet by chance I ran into him on a street corner. Before me stood Jason at 19. Compared to the mature allure of his 30-year-old self, he now carried the striking, untamed beauty of youth that could drive anyone mad. He was looking at a book in a shop window, his brow furrowed in concentration. He must have felt my gaze. He turned. Our eyes met. There was no recognition, only the familiar, competitive spark I remembered from our school days. But this time I saw past it. I saw the boy who had written the love letter. I saw the man who would wait for me. He looked surprised, then wary. "Emma." This time he was direct. No games, no pretense of rivalry. He took a step toward me. "I want to ask you something." My heart began to beat a wild, hopeful rhythm. "Go on." "Back in 11th grade, he said, his gaze unwavering. "The love letter I gave you. You threw it away. Was it because you hated me?" I pretended to ponder, letting the moment stretch, watching the hope and fear war in his beautiful eyes. Then a slow, genuine smile spread across my face, a smile that held the wisdom of a lifetime he had yet to live. "I forgot," I said, my voice light. His eyes dropped, his fingers clenching at his sides so tightly they turned pale. The hope was draining from his face. I reached out, gently touching his arm. His gaze flew back to mine, startled. "But you can write another one," I said softly, my smile turning tender. "This time I won't throw it away." At those words, he lifted his head so quickly, astonishment flashing across his face as he stared at my smile. It was like spring carrying the news of blossoms in bloom. A slow, wondrous smile broke across his own face, erasing years of guarded loneliness. Jason's love letter could take its time. We had an entire lifetime to get it right.